let's look at, I think it's very interesting to remind ourselves of a few key dates. So how long have we been around as a species? It depends, it's still a work in progress, but between now, it used to be that we thought we were 3 million years old, and it was pushed back to 6 million. Now we say between 6 and 9 million years old. But 6 and 9 million years ago, we were not like in our present form. We were kind of ape men, really. We were, there's different what are called hominids, types of pre-modern human types. And as far as we know, we originated somewhere in Africa. There's two candidates for that. Ethiopia is one of them, and South Africa is another one. So somewhere around those regions, we appeared. The Ethiopian theory is there was a jungle in Ethiopia, and then there was a separation that happened between in the middle of the jungle, a rift that got created. And the northern part stayed a jungle, and the southern part became more like the climate change, and it became more like a steppe. And so we had to descend from the trees. The monkeys that were in the hominids, or the apes that were on the southern side had to adapt to this new environment, and they couldn't live in the trees eating fruits and living in that ecosystem. So they gradually came down to the ground, and they had to start walking and survive in that environment. So the beginning of humanity is when we descend from the trees and start walking, as far as we know. The theory, right? We can't be sure. But then we stay around in Africa for quite a while, until about 200,000 years ago, Homo sapiens appears. So modern human, minus 200,000 years. And also then that's when we had great migrations, the migrations out of Africa. They had started before. There were in fact migrations before, but the modern form of human started migrating through the Middle East into Europe. Others, and we keep settling these different areas. The Middle East, Europe, others go through Asia, all the way to India and Southeast Asia, and others continue in the northern part of Asia, across the Strait of Bering into America, and all the way down to South America. So South America being the last part of the world that was settled by modern humans, hominids. And then, past that, years later, we have much more exchanges that happen as we invent, boats and other means of transportation. And but that's kind of the motif. So between 6 and 9 million years for the appearance of our species, minus 200,000 for the appearance of Homo sapiens, right? Now, later, we're still like in prehistory, right? A big event that happens is the next big event that happens is the domestication of animals and the advent of agriculture. So we approximately domesticate animals around 9,000 to 8,000 years ago, and organized agriculture appears about 7,000 years ago. Now we don't think of agriculture as an enormous leap of technology, but it's one of the biggest leap forward in the history of humanity. Because what happens with agriculture is we move from being nomadic to being sedentary. So before agriculture happens, we were, as far as we used to believe, so paleoanthropologists used to believe that we were hunters and we would follow herds of animals. Now the new theory is that most likely we were scavengers. So we would follow herds, animals of prey would have some kills, and then we would steal the kills from those animals and eat them. Right? So all of those images of brave men attacking mammoths and all that, most likely were just scavengers. But so we would move around as the animals moved around with the seasons, right? And as sometimes we had some meat, sometimes we would just gather food and would keep moving the camp. By the way, how do you think agriculture happened? How do you move from being nomadic to all of a sudden one person say, hey, I have a great idea. We should start planting stuff in the ground and growing it and watering it, and that will be food, right? That sounds like a crazy, advance. Who would think that? So the theory is that we would most likely. It happened with an observant person who noticed that the dump It happened with the dump, right? So every time we had different camps, we would probably like throw our stuff in the dump, and maybe like also go to the bathroom there, and some seeds would grow in that. And so after a while, somebody noticed that where the dump was, when you came back the year after, some edible plants, the type of plants that we gathered, started growing there. And after a while of noticing that, maybe somebody decided to purposefully plant some stuff in there. And then eventually we're like, you know what? Maybe we can systematically do that. And that, of course, happens over the thousands of years. But eventually we have organized agriculture. So organized agriculture means we stay put in one place and tend the fields. That means we have settlements. We can, instead of having tents, we have hard buildings. And that also means that's where, I'm going to my point here of organizations. That's when we have a surplus of food. So not everybody has to hunt or gather all the time to survive. That means we have a surplus of time. And with that time, some people can start doing other stuff than food. And what do? Some people become artisans and start making tools. So the people who are the best at making tools start making tools for everybody else in exchange for food. Some people continue to specialize. The very good hunters or the very good soldiers, fighters become soldiers. And some people become the organizers of all of that. You have sort of political, the chiefs, the notion of a chief appears. Maybe you have a medicine man, medicine woman that appears. So what I'm trying to say here is you start to see the beginning of a division of labor. Division of labor is an essential ingredient to understanding modern organizations and the history of humanity. So part of the history of humanity is moving from being everybody, except for gender-based division of labor, which we talked about, everybody was doing a little bit of everything. Everybody was gathering, everybody was hunting, everybody was making their own tools, to eventually some people becoming good at something and specializing in that. And a trade occurring. And that's kind of modern society. So with shortly after organized agriculture, you have cities that appear. As we get better and better at agriculture, and as we expand the fields, and as we have more surplus of food, the cities become bigger and bigger, and that's when you have the beginning of empires. And with all of that, very quickly, you have modern society appear. You have kingdoms and empires that occur with armies, with artisans, with science, with a specialization that happens among people. In different parts of the world, this was replicated. Where it happened first was the Middle East. But then it spread to Europe, Asia, South America, other parts of Africa. And then we're going to go, after that, we have a few, those are the things that kind of like minor pyramids. Okay, it's just a point here. So great buildings, the discovery of bronze and then iron, right, which was important. The Greek society and advent of democracy, right? The printing press, industrialization. So this is a brief crash course in early human history, right? Understanding where we are now. So notice that in this history, you don't have a lot of modern organizations. For the longest part in history, you didn't have organizations that were not as present as they are today. So to understand organization, you have to ask yourself, why are they there? Why do we need them? What function do they have? So that's kind of how sociologists think. What's the function of organizations? Why do we have modern organizations as opposed to tribes or other forms of social organization? The same way that if you want to understand ants or bees, you ask yourself, why are they organized the way they are? Why does the beehive look the way it does? Why do you have a specialization as it occurs, right? So in humans, the way we organize ourselves has changed.